Across the vast Eurasian landmass lies the world's largest country by area, the Russian Federation. Russia's roots trace back to the East Slavs, who later formed the nations of Russia, Ukraine, and Belarus. Their first state was Kievan Rus. In 988, Kievan Rus adopted Eastern Orthodoxy from the Byzantine Empire, marking a fusion of Byzantine and Slavic cultures. This blend evolved into Russian culture, lasting for centuries. In the mid-12th century, Kievan Rus was conquered by Mongol horsemen and fragmented into independent principalities, each claiming to inherit Russian culture. By the 13th century, Moscow rose to prominence as the cultural center. In 1472, the Grand Duke of Moscow married the last princess of the Eastern Roman Empire, leading Russian rulers to view themselves as heirs to the Roman legacy.
To reflect their Roman legacy, Russian rulers adopted the double-headed eagle, now Russia's national coat of arms. In 1547, Grand Duke Ivan IV crowned himself Tsar, turning Moscow into the Tsardom of Russia. He reduced noble power by including merchants, peasants, and monks in parliament, strengthening the monarchy and creating an autocracy. With internal unity, Russia expanded, conquering the Kazan, Astrakhan, and Siberian Khanates from 1547 onward. These campaigns integrated diverse ethnic groups from the Volga, Urals, and Siberia, making Russia a multi-ethnic state. After Ivan IV's death, unrest led to a 13-year war with the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. Russia prevailed, regaining Smolensk and securing eastern Ukraine.
Russia entered a new era under the Romanov dynasty. At the time, the Netherlands dominated global trade, enjoying a century of wealth from overseas commerce and plunder. Britain was preparing for its industrial revolution, gaining strength through expanding markets and commercial power. In mainland Europe, France, under Louis XIV, had become the dominant force by the mid-17th century. In contrast, Russia remained economically backward. It relied on agriculture, had minimal industry, only a few dozen craft workshops, and foreign merchants controlled most trade, leaving Russia without a competitive edge. Education was dominated by the Orthodox Church, and public knowledge was limited. In Moscow, fewer than 3 in 100 people could read.
Peter saw the vast gap between Russia and Western Europe. Aside from its size, Russia lagged behind in nearly every area. In 1697, Tsar Peter traveled abroad in disguise, visiting the Netherlands, Sweden, Prussia, Austria, and Britain to learn about Western science and culture. His journey sparked uproar at home. Many Russians viewed it as a humiliating admission of inferiority, wounding national pride. In 1698, while visiting an arms factory, Peter received urgent news. A regiment of musketeers was plotting a coup. He rushed back to Moscow and crushed the rebellion. In less than a month, over 1,000 rebel officers and soldiers were executed. With the revolt suppressed, Peter launched sweeping reforms. He abolished the traditional Russian calendar, adopting the European Gregorian calendar. In September 1700, he began efforts to open a window to Europe.
Peter I launched a war against Sweden to secure access to the Baltic Sea and connect Russia with Europe. Although Russia deployed 100,000 troops, 10 times more than Sweden, they were decisively defeated by just 10,000 Swedish soldiers. Determined to reform, Peter rebuilt the military. In 1709, 9 years later, Russia met Sweden again and achieved a major victory. This shifted Russia's role in European affairs. In 1713, Peter moved the capital from Moscow, the 800-year-old seat of power, to St. Petersburg, a new city on the Neva River, on land taken from Sweden. In 1721,
he proclaimed the Russian Empire and named himself Peter the Great.
After Peter I's death in 1725, Russia saw 6 different rulers in just 37 years. None had the vision or strength to continue his legacy. The capital was moved back to Moscow, and many of Peter's reforms were reversed. In 1762, a 33-year-old empress took the throne, Catherine II. She claimed to be Peter I's true successor and vowed to revive his vision for Russia. During her reign, Enlightenment ideas spread across Europe. Catherine embraced them, promoting education, founding schools, and encouraging literature, especially by women. In her 5th year, she introduced European legal principles focused on equality, liberty, and fraternity. She declared that everyone must follow the law and questioned the need for slavery. However, her reforms clashed with deep-rooted traditions and the tension between serfdom and industrialization. Ultimately, Catherine II's reforms failed. During her 34-year reign, Russia gained access to the Black Sea, took part in the 3 partitions of Poland, and annexed Alaska and the Aleutian Islands. Russia became a vast empire spanning Europe, Asia, and America. Catherine became the 2nd Russian ruler to earn the title the Great. However, deep social issues, especially serfdom, remained unresolved and severely hindered industrial development. Military expansion alone could not sustain great power status. While Britain, France, and Germany surged ahead through industrial revolutions, Russia failed to recognize the looming crisis. Its defeat in the Crimean War in 1856 marked a sharp decline in Russia's European dominance. Though Russian soldiers fought bravely, they were outmatched by Britain and France's superior weapons and technology. Russia relied on wooden sailing ships, while its enemies deployed ironclads and large-caliber cannons. The Crimean War defeat once again exposed Russia's lag behind Europe. Under growing pressure from intellectuals, businessmen, and reform-minded officials, serfdom was increasingly blamed for stalling industrial progress. In response, Russia abolished nearly 5 centuries of serfdom in 1860. After its 1905 defeat by Japan, a bourgeois revolution forced the Tsar to create a State Duma and appoint a prime minister to lead reforms. But 2 years later, the Tsar dissolved the Duma, crushing reformist hopes. Amid rising unrest, the Tsarist regime staggered on. 4 years after Tolstoy's death, World War I erupted, dragging Russia into chaos. On November 7, 1917, the October Revolution broke out. With the roar of cannon fire, the Soviet government, the world's first proletarian regime, was born, ending Tsarist rule. Under Lenin, the Soviet Union launched the new economic policy, reviving its economy by introducing market, commodity, and monetary elements into socialism. This marked a major shift in Marxist theory. In 1929, the New York Stock Exchange crash triggered a global economic crisis, exposing flaws in capitalism. Meanwhile, the USSR advanced rapidly under its first 5-year plan, attracting Western capital, technology, and talent. By 1937, after completing the second 5-year plan, the USSR ranked first in Europe and second globally in industrial output. In just 2 decades, it achieved industrialization that had taken Western nations far longer. In 1939, World War II broke out. Germany launched a surprise attack on the USSR. The Red Army lost over 1 million troops, and Western industrial areas were occupied. Still, in 1942, the USSR produced over 20,000 aircraft, nearly double Germany's output. This industrial strength was key in defeating Nazi Germany. After the war, the Soviet Union grew stronger and gained global influence, with many nations turning to socialism. As Soviet ideology expanded across Europe, tensions with the US rose. In 1946, Churchill's Iron Curtain speech marked the Cold War's beginning.
The Truman Doctrine expanded U.S. security worldwide, making communist containment a core policy. In 1953, Khrushchev became first secretary and launched de-Stalinization, sparking uprisings in Hungary and Poland. In 1964, Khrushchev was ousted and Brezhnev took power. Brezhnev promoted loyalists, forming a privileged elite. He pursued expansionist policies, fought border conflicts with China, and launched a decade-long war in Afghanistan. Despite military strength, the Soviet economy lagged behind the West. Brezhnev's efforts to improve living standards were undermined by weak economic foundations, sowing decline. Diplomatically, he pursued great power politics, interfering abroad and competing with the U.S., which weakened Soviet strength. In 1985, Gorbachev took office amid stalled reforms and shifted to political change, but the rigid system worsened tensions. In 1991, the Baltic states declared independence. Soon after, Russia, Belarus, and Ukraine formed the Commonwealth of Independent States, CIS. On December 25th, Gorbachev resigned. The Supreme Soviet dissolved the USSR into 15 independent states. Russia became the sole successor, inheriting all assets and diplomacy. As the red flag was lowered over the Kremlin, 74 years of Soviet rule ended.